Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome. I'm Rob Doherty, and this is the FSTVS Podcast Executive Edition, supported by Liberry Consulting and hosted by Julian Scott, the animation consultant for Film London. In this podcast series, we'll be chatting to the movers and the shakers in the animation industry, and discovering a little bit more about what they do, how they got there, their thoughts on the animation industry, and I hope get to meet the person behind that executive title. The career journey Julian is going on this week is that of Crosby Clyse. Currently MD at DNeg Animation out of London, Crosby takes us on his career journey from the hills of Appalachia through a passion for music and on to Pixar, where he inadvertently fell in love with animation. Crosby's is another inspiring story of talent, drive and positivity taking you to places you might only have dreamed about, even while sometimes having to overcome seemingly insurmountable personal obstacles. Now, slow down and let Crosby take you on his journey with him.
Crosby, hi, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I feel quite honored to be part of this lineup that you have. So thank you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, indeed. Now, you're managing director for DNeg Animation globally, and you lead DNeg's animation studio and its slate of productions and crew in the UK, North America, and India. You've also worked at Pixar on films Onward, Finding Dory, The Good Dinosaur, and Brave, which are all fantastic movies. And we'll chat about what you've done and what's to come from DNeg in a bit. But you describe yourself as a proud Appalachian. So I think your early days were not here in the UK. What was young Crosby up to? Any influences from your early days that pointed you towards a career in entertainment?
I am from Appalachia. That's true. I grew up in a small area in the States in the middle of the country in southeast Ohio and northeast Kentucky, right along the river, nestled in the hills. It's right where Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia meet, and it's the land of the country music highway where the mother-daughter duo Winona and Naomi Judd are from, Billy Ray Cyrus. So heavy in country music, but also heavy in football. And I am the number 3 of 4 kids. And that just means I'm the middle child. And I'm also number 18 of 21 grandchildren on my dad's side. So in terms of family, there was always a lot of family chaos. And because of that, I think in my own way, I became pretty independent or self-sufficient and mostly self-entertaining. So as a small kid, I would say I was relatively quiet, and I was usually either drawing on my own or inventing things on my own in the corner of the house or in my head just to keep myself entertained. And off that, I think multiple things started influencing me to go into entertainment. My parents were pretty amazing at exposing us to music. With that many kids, we were always in the car, like constantly in the car, and they'd always have something different on in the radio, which was great. They were very eclectic in terms of their music taste, but also on Sunday nights, to wear us down, they'd put music on for about an hour or so for us to dance around the living room. Really just to exhaust us so I think they could get some sleep. So music was pretty big in our household. And they'd also take us to see concerts or sometimes regional or touring theater here and there. But we would have to drive to one of the local cities, which were all about 2 hours away. Cincinnati was about 2 hours away. Columbus was 2 hours away. Charleston, West Virginia. Everything was a bit of a drive, but they made a good effort for us to be exposed and to see things. And then more immediate, I was about 4, I want to say, when my brother started taking piano lessons, my older brother. And when he would be done sitting at the piano practicing, I would go straight to the bench and start picking up what he was doing just by ear. Again, I think, honestly, I was just fascinated, but also entertaining myself. And my mom and dad noticed my interest. And they asked my brother's piano teacher at the time if she would take me on as a student, even though I was 4. And that teacher was pretty adamant that I was way too young to be starting piano lessons. And that didn't deter my parents at all. My parents, being who they are, they were determined to find a teacher somewhere in the area who would take someone that young. And luckily, they convinced someone, and I started piano lessons. And there was something about the piano. There was the discipline and the practicing, and also like the calming nature of melodies and patterns of music and whatnot. But there was something also, I think, was important to me, was creating something just by pressing keys on the piano. And with time, that became like my escape, I want to say. And I kind of lived in that music world daily after school for multiple hours a day. And I played piano pretty seriously all the way up through college. And there was one point that I thought potentially about music as a career, but I think in high school I had figured out it was very much more for me, less for something I wanted to do in life. It was like therapeutic to me overall. And then because we were a pretty devout Catholic family, and because I got pretty good by the age of 10, finding piano players for the local churches was getting pretty hard. So I got asked to start playing piano at our church. And I started playing weekly mass, and then that became weddings, that became funerals, that became everything. And music then led me to think more about, I think probably in mass, whether consciously or subconsciously, it's very, Catholic mass is all about ritual and their structure, and it's quite performative in a way on its own. And I probably, by the time I graduated high school, I probably had played 300, 400 services. So, you get into a groove. You know exactly what to expect at every given moment. You know the pacing. So beyond the music, there suddenly became something that was structured in a performative way in terms of the overall ritual of the Mass. So there's the music track. So I had a music track going. And then my sisters, I have an older sister and a younger sister. They both did ballet. And in the carpooling of 4 kids, I sat through a lot of dance classes waiting for my sisters to be done, watching them and their fellow students, the teachers in the lessons. And like myself with piano, there was something really fascinating that they were finding in their classes, where I found patterns in music. They were enjoying dance routines, and, there's performance in that as well. We happened to also be family friends with a dance teacher who had kids our age. One of her sons was in my class, and they constantly needed boys to participate in their recitals. And I always volunteered. To partake once a year. I think I did, with my sisters, I did the Nutcracker 6 times, 6 years in a row. So then there's like this dance influence from my sisters. And then another track would have been one of my uncles, who happened to be the football coach, also was the speech and debate teacher, and directed the yearly musical at the high school. Which is, to me, iconic and ironic that the football coach was also the director of the musical theater shows. And he had a couple shows where they needed kids to participate. And I auditioned and I got cast. And that kind of was I think it was the combination of the music track, the performative nature of Mass, maybe I'm projecting here, what I was doing with my sisters, partaking in their dance recitals, kind of all kludged together. And the theater bug took off for me. I mean, it was school theater, don't get me wrong. But there was a group of students crafting something together. And I think I was like completely obsessed and in awe. And that then led to another teacher who was doing community theater in another town nearby. and she gave my name to this guy, Ed Figgins, who was running the theater, to give a call to see if I would be interested. They needed kids as well to perform, and got the part. That one show rolled into another show, into another show, into another show, and my interest slowly moved from, I was less interested in being on stage and in front of the lights, and much more behind the scenes. I really got into set and prop design and construction, and I was doing 5 to 6 shows a year. So beyond all those masses I was playing piano for, I probably did 30, 35 amateur theater productions as well before I graduated. So I think it's a mixture of small town music, piano, church service, my sister's dance recitals, and then really a ton of theater, to be perfectly honest, for sure. Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like animation sort of, I mean, although you did say you used to, as a kid, you used to draw a little bit, but it doesn't sound like animation was necessarily your first choice of career.
No, not at all. I don't think I even considered it. At home, or where I grew up, I think people went to the cinema, to the movies. We went as a family. We definitely saw every animated film that came out. But I think I never thought of it as something to study for whatever reason. Maybe it was that time period, that part of the country. And I don't mean this term in like a bad way, but I think film was more like you consumed it more, you enjoyed it more, you never thought of it as a thing to do in your life, versus theater was very tangible, even though it was very amateur. It was very much waiting for Guffman amateur theater hour at home. It was still like a tangible thing in the area. And yeah, I never thought about animation until I was in school, and I stumbled upon it, to be perfectly honest, coming out of one of my first gigs. When I went to school in New York, and at that point I was really pursuing being a scenic designer, and I got really lucky. My first professor of my first semester of school saw that I was pretty good at model building, the miniatures that you do for set design, and he hired me as a design assistant immediately. And I started working in nonprofit off-Broadway theater companies in New York. And then that spiraled from one gig to another, to production assistant gigs, to internships, to apprenticeships. And I eventually found myself in the Disney on Broadway office, which is run by Tom Schumacher even to this day. And Tom was in theater and arts in the LA area in the 80s, but he was hired by Peter Schneider to join Disney Animation for Rescuers Down Under. So he was a theater person who went into animation, eventually ran development for Disney Animation, then ran Disney Animation and Disney on Broadway at the same time. And then eventually was just doing Disney on Broadway. And I was in his office as an assistant. And we were developing, I think we must have been developing the ice show for Toy Story 3 at the time. And I saw an early cut of Toy Story 3. And that was the first time I thought, oh, Pixar, animation, that's interesting. Never thought about that. And I, gave it some consideration. I was also pretty burned out in New York because I was working or apprenticing full-time while in school, trying to make the most of being in New York City. And they were looking for an assistant. And I thought, oh, this would be a cool break for a bit. I've never really spent much time in California at all. Really, nothing more than 6 hours in California. I have not done animation. There's the West Coast lifestyle that felt easier, breezier than New York City. New York City was totally my jam. Like, I found myself in New York. I wanted to be in New York a long time, but I knew I needed a break, and that seemed like a good option. And so, yeah, I sent my CV over. They saw Tom on my resume immediately, and I met with one of their producers and got the gig, and then made the leap of faith, thinking, I'll just do one show. I'll go have this California experience. It was less about animation. It was very much about trying something new and trying California. And then I'll come back to New York right when the show's done, and I'll continue on with my life. And Tom Schumacher even said to me, because of his experience as well, he thought I should stay in theater, which I understood why at the time. But he thought that, or warned me, you say you're going to go out there for 2 years and you're going to come back and continue on. But I'm telling you, you're going to go out there and 10 years of your life is going to go by and you're going to not know what happened and you'll still be in animation. And he didn't mean that in a bad way. I think he knew that I would get the bug, and then I wouldn't look back. And that's exactly what happened. I went there for 2 and I ended up staying there for 6, and then I moved here. And I'm fully animation now. I love theater. That's another reason why I'm in London. Absolutely love theater. But I'm animation full blood now.
So your entry into animation was more about lifestyle than sort of career choice, and you thought it'd be a nice easy break. Has it been easy? Has it been a break?
No. I think California was quieter and a different pace than New York. So in that regard, yes. But the career itself, no. Some of that has to do with the industry and animation at large, yes. A lot of that has to do with my personality type. I grew up with 2, I don't want to call them workaholics, but I can't think of a better word for them. Very devoted to their jobs, parents. And so I got double dose. And a lot of, I think my personality is defined by what I do or what I create or work, the good and the bad of that. And so I think I threw myself, once I got to Pixar, I threw myself fully into it. It was so foreign to me. I remember my very first meeting showing up because I was taking over for an assistant that had left. And I was meeting all the department managers of this show, and they had already been in production for a couple of years, and they were calling out shot numbers and frame numbers and all this like foreign lingo. I had no idea what they were talking about, and I remember leaving that room being like, what in the world did I just sign up for? Like, I have no idea what's going on. And I threw myself fully in. I probably did the same amount of hours as I was doing in New York, just trying to learn, because it was completely new to me and it was fascinating. And then with time, like, I think it took about 3 months and then it finally clicked. Like, it was like the light bulb went off and it all just made sense to me, like kind of how the departments worked together, the production worked overall, who I needed to talk to for what, to make sure the producer and the director had what they needed. And then, of course, with roles and industry changes, that hasn't stopped. Like, it's a constantly evolving medium that I'm still learning every day. So, yeah, it's not been the vacation that I thought it would be, but I think it's been incredibly gratifying and rewarding for sure.
You said you went into Pixar as an assistant, right?
Yeah. Yes, as the producer's assistant on Brave.
Okay, and so you worked, as I said before, on Finding Dory, Good Dinosaur, and Brave, which you just mentioned. Did your presumably there was a progression through the ranks as you went from movie to movie? Was that right?
Yeah. So I went as an assistant. I assisted this unbelievable woman by the name of Catherine Sarafian, who had been there since really early on, since the first Toy Story, and she knew I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life and career, and that I was really there to learn more than anything. And she, just as a human being, is an incredible mentor, both in, the craft of animation, but also management and coaching and you name it. She's just phenomenal. I feel like everybody in life has one of those people where if they would call you and ask you to drop everything and run, you would. And Catherine's definitely one of those people for me. And so she exposed me everything from artist management to recording sessions to screening cycles, story development, to budgeting. She, whether it be me helping prepare a presentation or whatnot, she was really good at walking me through what she needed or exposing me to things, honestly, I don't think most people were exposed to, because she knew I was like a sponge absorbing everything. And after that show ended, I was trying to figure out what to do. And at that point, the assistants there were basically exec assistants. There wasn't really a career trajectory for them unless you moved into the production track. It was a very standard American animation studio setup. So I had to make the jump from more or less an exec assistant down to over to a production coordinator gig on one of the shows, because that was truly where there was growth opportunity, was going the production track. And the production track, there's various branches off of it, but the main one is the assistant to the cord, to the department manager, to the overall production manager, to the AP, to the producer. It's very linear. And so the first gig I had after assisting, I was a coordinator on Good Dinosaur, the first version of Good Dinosaur, as a layout coordinator. And it was such a change of pace for me, because where they were in production, it was really quiet. Not much was in shot production yet. And I had come off of being in the epicenter of a show that was complex in nature, and there were a lot of things that were happening on Brave that I was not challenged enough, I would say. It was hard. I went from being incredibly busy to not busy at all. And some of that had to do with the production having some stumbles along the way. And everybody kept telling me, enjoy this quiet time. Remember, you moved to California to have quiet time. And I just did not do well with it. And around the same time, The Good Dinosaur had a story change. There was a director change. There was this thing that happened in Pixar called Super Story, where they redid the film over a summer. Every story artist, every editor in the building touched that film for the second version of it. And I was absorbed into editorial. So I became an editorial cord, and I was responsible for all of Act 3, managing Act 3 over a screening cycle. And when I say every editor and story artist, I mean 50-50 of each. It was this I don't want to call it experiment, but this belief of we will redo this film swiftly and still hit the release date. And yeah, then I got the editorial bug, and that version of it didn't get made. There's a reset. Everybody started changing roles, and the script soup role ended up opening for the third version of The Good Dinosaur. And so I became the script soup on the third version of The Good Dinosaur. And I became responsible for helping manage the writing process and the voice records. And that was great. That got me back to thinking outside of the Pixar block radius, because I was traveling for recording sessions. I was dealing with actors. It was kind of somewhat going back to theater roots in a way. And a lot of people we were recording were all theater actors. So that was cool. That was really cool. And then I took a little break after that show for family reasons, and returned to Script Soup again for Onward as they were starting out. Similar, helping manage the writing process with Keith, the writer, and Dan, the director and writer, and the initial scratch records, voice records, casting, all of that for that show, which was great. But because I had done it before, and always someone that wants to learn something new or or try to cram as much in the day that I humanly can, I volunteered myself to jump also, while being script soup on Onward, to work in the production office on Finding Dory as they were delivering and our office manager left. So I went in the final months. I was doing double duty on 2 shows to do what I could to help the production office finish off Finding Dory, and did script soup on Onward, and eventually decided it was time to go. I had a great run, but it was time to go and find another adventure elsewhere.
This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the awesome Libery Consulting. Libery offers specially tailored industry-related training courses. Check them out at liberyconsulting.com. That's LIBERI consulting.com. You can also find links to their fantastic courses on the Festivus website.
So I was going to ask you what triggered the move from Pixar to DNeg, but clearly you, in your sort of normal sort of appetite for work and busyness, did you need another rest? Was that what made you go to DNeg?
It's a good question. So I mentioned that I took a break between Good Dinosaur and coming back for Onward. And at the very end of working on Good Dinosaur, my brother-in-law was tragically killed in a drunk driving incident. And so it was a huge family reset for my sister, who had 2 young kids. She had a 6-month-old and I want to say a 2-year-old. And it was a reset for my entire family, and we were all doing what we could to support her. It was just like a shock to the system. And she didn't live close to my parents. My brother-in-law was a Brit. He had moved to the States to play football, soccer in the States, and became a women's football coach for universities. So they had hopped around the States for various kicks that he had. So she was not near my family when this happened, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And my dad was still running a small business. My mom was still working in the school, so we were trying to balance out who could cover what. And I had been away from my family so long. I think it was also a shock to my system as well. I was so career driven that I took time off. Really, I took time off to spend time with my sister and her kids. My partner or boyfriend at the time had moved to London, so I was away from my closest relationship as well. I just needed a break. And I wasn't even sure after Good Dinosaur whether or not I was going to go back to Pixar, to be honest. I did a lot of soul searching, and at that point I really thought, well, maybe I should go back to theater. Maybe I should try something else. And when I came over in my break, I spent some time with my partner here. And there was a designer I worked for when I was in school over here in London, actually, a scenic designer by the name of Bob Crowley, a legendary UK scenic designer. And I spent like 2 months back in the studio for free. Basically, I was just trying to figure out if scenic design is what I wanted to go back to, and realized, no, I had moved on from that period of life. So I was really soul searching, trying to figure out what to do. And, you can only take time off for so long until you need a paycheck again. So I went back to Pixar to see what to do next. And I kept looking while I was on Onward and Finding Dory, quietly looking, both in California, but also here in the UK. And it was clear my partner was going to stay here. And I was very happy to come to London. So I started meeting with people. I met with a few groups about them wanting to branch into animation. But ultimately, I had to have a visa. There was no other way I could have been here. I had to have a work visa. And I was clearly not going to get that in theater. So animation was kind of the way here, but also where I was comfortable and where I don't know, I really hit a groove in it. It ticked every box for me, animation did. And so I continued on with that. And I eventually met through various intros, Tom Jacob, who was our founding president, and hit it off. Like, Tom was such a charmer, such a charmer, and he was talking about all the possibilities of what animation could end up being at Double Negative at the time, and it was going to be a studio without a house style. It was going to be a Surface studio first to start out with, which meant you were going to work with multiple LA studios, multiple creative teams, and there was going to be no conforming. Plus, they were going to have to pivot the pipeline away from VFX to do something unique or bespoke for animation to a certain extent that had this like startup aspect to it, or culture that he was discussing, that was everything I had heard about from the original Pixar team, like the people who have been at Pixar since the early 80s and early 90s. You hear about that period of time so much because it's what defined the company, and everything Tom was saying echoed what they had. Our friends at Pixar had said, that it was really, really enticing to me, and I really kicked it off with him, and I accepted a gig, and they had some art prod soups along the way as Double Negative was trying to figure out what animation could be, and the Locksmith shows weren't up and running yet. So I came in as really kind of the first consistent production person, and it was myself, Tom, and 10 or so soups and leads, some people from VFX, some people that Tom had also immigrated over to the UK to define animation at DNeg. So yeah, I was here pretty early, and then I've been here for all the shows today and kind of the ramp up overall, which has been amazing to see. But when Tom hired me, I thought I was being hired to be the production supervisor, the department manager just for layout. And there was no layout department here. There was no layout pipeline here for animation. There was a bit for VFX, but it was plate oriented. It was full startup, us figuring out what we were doing. And it just evolved from there, really.
So it sounds like it's a bit almost like a blank sheet of paper that you could form whatever you wanted. You could make it your own.
Yeah, for sure. I remember having a production database meeting my first few weeks here, and Allison, who now happens to be one of our digital executive producers, Allison was running the shotgun group, and she had gone through this a couple times with Tom about setting up just shot grid flow, whatever you want to call it these days, at DNeg for animation. And ultimately what she said was, I'm just going to give you admin privilege. You figure it out. Good luck. Call me if you need anything. Because I don't think she thought I was going to stay. Because no one really knew what was happening in the animation group. There was no show. It was all look development tests. Some of them pretty good, but it was really hard to get anybody to commit to do work at DNeg for animation because, one, hadn't done a show before. Two, animation show before. Two, they hadn't done character performance, high-level character performance of that quantity and quality since John Carter. They were mainly doing the Christopher Nolan films or environment and background films. So animation wasn't really the biggest priority at DNeg at the time. And so anybody that came in, it was kind of let's see how long it lasts. And Allison she would laugh about this too. Allison was the same. And yeah, she gave me admin privilege to the production database, and I started cross-comparing Tom's experience with my Pixar experience, and then building out the overall production workflow, reporting system, how the departments are going to feed together. We only had soups and leads at the time, so it was me with the soups and leads figuring out specifics for the department, figuring out machine specs, what are the hardware costs, building out a business plan basically with Tom. And for my always wanting to learn something brain or have a challenge brain, it ticked every single box. It was frustrating as hell, don't get me wrong, because it was when are we going to have a show? When are we going to have a show? And my partner was completing shows left and right. And I was here for multiple years without any show. But I stuck it out, and by golly, it paid off in dividends by the end.
Well, it sounds like it. And it's, you look at, what you're describing then, which sounds like sort of the nicest possible way, the Wild West. And now what you're up to is an incredible change. And you say that it was kind of like, well, I'm going to give you admin privileges and off you go. And there must have been an immense level of trust there that you were given.
From Tom, particularly Tom. Matt Holman was really the protector of our little bubble. Alex and Ellen too, but Matt and Namit, all of them, they were really good about like that, protect that group. And if something goes awry, talk it out. But they were really good. It was an investment in the long. Everybody saw the potential in the long run of what that investment could be. Even if like day to day, like VFX is week to week, month to month. Animation is year to year. So they knew it was going to take a while for the investment to come back, and the potential and the possibilities of what it could become was going to take a bit. And because they went in with that mindset, I think it just gave us free reign. And then within our group, Tom was the king, the prince of delegation and trusting his crew. And he really let me run with everything. He would, give me comment or feedback and whatnot along the way. But he was really, really good about just letting his crew run with things to figure it out, and watching the spark blossom into what it became. There was a lot of trust on the company side, at the high leadership level, and a lot of trust with Tom. I will say in between, we definitely frustrated and aggravated our VFX colleagues for sure, because we were either like breaking something. Like there's many times because I had admin privileges in Shotgun that I overread VFX data by accident. Like it didn't like damage any shows, and Allison was really good about keeping it quiet and we could revert and whatnot, but I definitely impacted some shows along the way, whether or not those producers know it, for a couple hours, only for a couple hours. And or we would do some pipeline adjust, or we'd hit the render farm or a certain way, and it would cause issues. And there would be friction of like why we wanted to do things different than VFX, because it needed to be optimized, because the shows in animation are in terms of technology larger most of the time than the weight of certain VFX shows. But with time and acknowledgement and progress, we found understanding between the two groups for sure. Yeah.
Do you still have admin privileges?
No. I did. I will say I had them till maybe 2 years ago, when I was still head of production. And I remember the day it happened, because I was like so nervous about it, really nervous about it. And it's all turned out fine. But having the keys for so long and not being able to do things a certain way on your own without looping other people in, it's going to be a new concept. But it was exactly where we were as a company. We were no longer this tiny little startup, wild, wild west. It needed to be much more structured in how we were changing things, and made total sense. But it was definitely a change.
Now, DNeg's work is primarily in, I suppose, what you would call the studio system, which is quite unlike independent films, where producers find the finance from numerous sources, co-production partners, sales agents, soft money. How are your films put together, and how does that differ from being an independent?
That's a good question. So, like I mentioned, we started first as a service studio. So coming out of the VFX model, we were going to be a digital service provider for animation. So our partners, our creative partners, the studios predominantly in the States, are funding most of the time the films themselves. We've had a couple films that were co-productions on our creative partner side, and they manage all of that. And yes, there are impacts of service work being fully funded by the studio or it being co-production. There's more nuance and voices and paperwork that has to be done. But we pivoted to not only service work, but with our Prime Focus Studios banner, going into co-productions ourselves, which means that we'll join folk like Alcon Entertainment, who did the Garfield movie with us, to invest in the title itself and bring the animation service to the film. And so in that way, yes, we're not looking for the funding. We're not having to find the cash. We're not having to do the sales. We lean on our partners for that, for sure. And on the co-prod side, at this current stage, for co-productions, it's mostly people coming to us, to be perfectly honest, with opportunities, scripts, reels, you name it, to see if it's something that's of interest to us, to our model, to what we are able to achieve in a moment of time. And we take a look. We look at it of how it fits within our overall business opportunities for the year or the next few years. But yeah, most people come to us. We're moving, slowly but surely to do more co-productions. And by us being a co-production partner already, I'm personally exposed, and our NAMA and our business team are exposed to a lot of the production partners out there and the financing now, that it's very much what Matt and Alex and Tom had talked about in setting it up. Start as a service studio first, figure out how we're going to do animation, because that is our business model at the moment. Then move into co-productions to figure out how we can inch our way, hopefully, potentially at some point, to intellectual property. So it's like one stage at a time. We've gone from service work to, with the Prime Focus brand, co-productions, and co-productions meaning where the DNeg animation arm is doing the service work, but then our Prime Focus Studios is the co-prod partner. And then we're doing Angry Birds 3 right now. And some of our service work includes, a lot of it is story edit arts, where the entire pipeline for a lot of the work. And then, at some point, hopefully under the Prime Focus banner, we'll have an original in there or some kind of IP that we're developing ourselves. But it's inching toward that along the way, which means, yes, we're coming on the studio setup right now, but long term, there'll be items that will be very much like the independent sphere. High-end independent film. Garfield technically was a high-end independent film in terms of it was being done by Alcon for independent animation outside of the 8 or so large studio setups. It was distributed by Sony, but it was done by Alcon. And Angry Birds, for instance, is done with ourselves, Rovio, Sega, Flywheel Media Group, and Dentsu. Is independent in a way, but not independent in terms of the amazing independent animation that's already done in Europe. It's a different version of independent.
Okay. And because I was going to ask you, it sounds like if you are moving sort of more into sort of looking at the finance yourselves and stuff like that. And you've got operations here in the UK, in London, in North America, and India. Do international tax incentives, and including the UK's new enhanced AVEC, affect your decisions about where to allocate work? Is that, or are there other factors that play into that as well?
It definitely impacts. I would be lying if I said it didn't impact. And our core sites are, of course, here in the UK, which, like you just mentioned, the increased tax incentive is great for animation in the UK. You have Quebec, and we have multiple shows under the previous Quebec tax incentive, which is now pivoted. And that pivot, or the decrease in tax incentive, has disrupted the Montreal market for sure. Less so us, but our partners, or our peers, I should say. And then we, of course, have crew in India. And ultimately, we have to, on the service side, deliver a film within a schedule and a budget. And you are always trying to protect and uphold the creative within those parameters. So it's with our partners figuring out the balance overall. But tax incentives and opportunities like that are really huge driver for our partners, really, first and foremost, in terms of setting their budget parameters. And then after that, it comes down to talent. Sure, we're making animated films, so honestly, our success is only because of the talent that's in the building. And we have to pivot to where the talent is, and the talent is very much global. It was so saturated in terms of being West Coast, a little tiny hub in New York and Connecticut in the States for a long time. And then Vancouver took off, and Montreal took off, and London, of course, from 2D to CG animation now. It's very global. It's come out of the just animation in North America being the priority to a very global enterprise, which has really benefited the films in terms of the types of talent that are out there. And the local governments in each of those regions have also made it enticing in terms of budgets now as well to take advantage or to really embrace that talent to bring the best to the work.
Oh, cool. And you've got, right now you've got, several big projects either sort of coming to an end or in production, whatever. You've got Locksmiths That Christmas for Netflix. You've got, I think you've mentioned it already, Warner Brothers Picture Animation's Cat in the Hat, and your project with Prime Focus Studios, Angry Birds Movie 3. These are all big projects, lots of moving parts, large budgets. Do you think that you've got any particular character traits or tools that you've assimilated over the years that help you manage that massive stuff?
I would say patterns. I really like patterns. I think I like early in the conversation I was talking about playing the piano, and there was like it gave me calm and comfort. A lot of it had to do with patterns in music, and was the same like watching my sister's dance classes and whatnot. I think I've always been fascinated by finding patterns and relating how things could be done based off of how they are done. I don't know. Finding patterns and ways of how people work together, but also how different regions and countries operate individually, but also within the global community and economy, and analyzing that and trying to understand it. Like, I'm just so fascinated by it all and how everything is interwoven together. So curiosity is one, and then being able to look at the patterns and analyze them in a certain way to figure out how things fit together at a not just a local level but a global level. And then I would say curiosity and how different cultures, easiest being regional, saying East and West, communicate, receive information, deliver information, work together within their region, how they differ and how they're similar, and how there are such intricate, what's the word I'm trying to say? It's not intricacies. What's the word? Intricate things. Intricacies. I don't know. What's the word?
I don't know.
Help me here. Intricate detail to each area. I find that fascinating, and I just totally blew that train of thought. Oh, well.
Don't worry.
Yeah, you can cut that out.
Or we can leave it in and destroy your career completely. Right?
Yeah, it's fine. I'm very human. Everybody's human.
And as we're coming to the end of this now, you've had the most. It's been really fascinating talking to you and hear your journey, and you've had the most fantastic career in features. And I don't think it's over yet. I have to be honest. I think there's more to come. But looking back, what do you think the best piece of advice that you have ever been given was?
It's hard to choose best advice. I've gotten really good advice the entire time because I've had amazing mentors back to back to back. I would say one of the key ones coming out of college when I was at Tom Schumacher's office and I was leaving, Tom told me, or he acknowledged that I never really conformed my taste or personality to folk around me. I always stayed pretty true to myself, and he was adamant that was important, that I always remain true to myself and my quirks, and sometimes my bluntness can get me into trouble, but it's like, don't compromise your beliefs. Just stay true to you, which I think was really informative at that period of time for me in my early 20s. And then the other incredibly important Tom in my life, Tom Jacob, who set up our whole operation, he said this line constantly to me, and has now had various meanings. But when we were setting up, or even on the first shows, he would constantly tell me to slow down and to take people on the journey with me. Or Crosby, slow down and take people on the journey with you, which has come to mean so many different things. First, when he was saying that, he was basically telling me, slow your brain down. You move way too fast. And it's because I'm usually multiple steps ahead. And that's too fast for some folk. And I needed to give more context, or go play by play, or let people understand my process of thinking, what was happening overall, before going straight to the conclusion. Now, this take people on the journey with you has, particularly with Tom passing and since then, I've come to interpret it more as very much appreciating the experience of making something with a group of people more, meaning taking time either to myself or with a group, with a crew, to focus less on the task of doing and more on the camaraderie of what we're achieving together, acknowledging and appreciating in a given moment what we are doing or what we have done, even in the hardest times, even if it's a hard day or a hard meeting. We're still doing great, amazing things, and I shouldn't always try to rush it. I need to cherish every moment, no matter how small. The good fortune of making something creative. Like, we're so lucky to be doing what we're doing. But also, more importantly, figuring out what I can take from it in terms of learning, and what our crew can take from it from learning. Yeah.
And my final sort of request for your thoughts is, what advice would you have given yourself at the start of your career? So it's a two-part question. What advice would you give yourself at the start of your career? And would you encourage somebody now to enter the industry?
Advice at the start of my career would be, don't be in a rush. And find a way. It goes back to Tom's advice to me, which is take people on the journey with you. So don't be in a rush, and find a way to cherish every moment, no matter how small it is. Both in terms of, like I was saying, we're so lucky to be doing what we're doing. But also, don't be in a rush, because there's always something else that you can learn from a situation. And I was at Martha Stewart as an apprentice for a bit, and she was always about teaching you something, no matter what you were doing in a given day. If it was feedback, it was all about teaching you the history or the reason or the intricacies of whatever craft of what we were doing. It could be cooking, or it could be dishware, or it could be literally arts and crafts. But it was all about teaching. And that stemmed from her philosophy of, it was important to her to always learn at least one thing every day. And I feel like when you rush, when you're younger, you lose sight or the opportunities of learning. So I learned a lot younger, but I wish I took even more time to be a little bit slower, to learn even more. And where Martha says you should try to learn one thing a day. My challenge to a younger me or younger folk in their career is to not just try to learn one thing, try to learn 5 new things a day in whatever you're doing. Even if it's going to get coffee for someone, like you're a runner and you're having to get coffee, who are the people in the room? Why do they want that drink? Why do they need that drink right now in that time of day? Why are they in the building? Like, there's so many things you can try to pick up on other than just focusing on the task, which is I have to go get someone coffee. So don't be in a rush and try to learn something from every situation. And then you also asked,
would you encourage someone to enter the industry right now?
I would. I think it's definitely, I'll totally acknowledge that it's hard right now. I totally acknowledge it's hard right now. The bubble has bursted and there's a reset happening. But I would never discourage someone to go into the industry if it's where their heart and their passion are. If that's where your heart and passion are, go fight for your dreams 1,000%. I would say don't think there is one way in, though. As I have said, I didn't seek animation. It kind of found me in a way. And you could be doing something else and find your way into animation, or you may have your heart in animation, but you need to do something else first. There are so many avenues to get in here, and I would stay open to all of them for sure.
Crosby, thank you. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, there you go. We've spoiled you again with another fantastic guest. We're extremely grateful to Crosby for his time and his candidness in sharing his uplifting career with us. And the show wouldn't happen at all without the wonderful work of Janet Balmforth at Liberia Consulting for her incredible organisational skills, to Julian Scott at Film London for his charm, wit and talent as our host. Find out more about Film London at filmlondon.org.uk. And the edit skills of Odelia Sickinger, who is also an awesome kids development and production executive. Find her on LinkedIn. Thank you all, and see you in the funny pages.